Well, for the fourth straight game in what has only been a 4-game series to this point, the Minnesota Timberwolves held a lead over the Dallas Mavericks in the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. But in Game 4 of their Western Conference Finals round, they finally were able to win one of them, staving off elimination in the process. And for the first time in what seems like a long time, the new face of the league, Anthony Edwards, actually looked like the best player in a basketball game he was playing in, as he was magnificent for the first and final quarters primarily, on the way to a near triple-double, dropping 29 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists on 11 of 25 from the field. And Karl Anthony Towns managed to stop shooting 12% from the three-point line for a change, as he too was big, scoring 25 points on 9 of 13 from the field and 4 of 5 from 3, including massive shots down the stretch of the fourth quarter. And last night, on the road, facing elimination, these were your two best players on the floor for a change. They outplayed the Dallas duo of Luka and Kyrie for the first time in the series last night, and that made all of the difference. But is this just an age-old case of too little too late, or did they just give themselves as good of a look as any team has had in recent memory of pulling off the unthinkable and making history? And sure, it is well documented. 155 teams have tried and none have succeeded. No team has ever overcome a 3-0 hole in NBA playoff history, with every team that has tried falling short of even forcing a Game 7 except for 4 of the 155 teams. In fact, of the 155 that have fallen into an 0-3 hole, 95 of them, or 61%, have been swept. But the Wolves, behind Edwards and Towns, made sure that didn't happen to them. And now, realistically, the Wolves should have a damn good look at this thing. Luka Doncic hasn't been healthy all postseason, and he isn't getting any healthier the longer the series goes. In fact, the opposite should be true. Also, there is no definitive time frame for Derek Lively's return, who took a frightening knee to the back of the head halfway through Game 3, and it's difficult to argue that his absence wasn't felt significantly in Game 4 last night. In 14 games so far this postseason, Lively has averaged 8.5 points per game and 7 rebounds while shooting 65% from the field. But his on-off metrics are insane, especially for a rookie, as the Mavericks have outscored opponents in the playoffs by 109 points with him on the floor. Now the series shifts back to Minnesota, and in fact, 2 of the remaining 3 games in this series will be in Minnesota, as they are the higher seed here. They're the higher seed, they are the better team. Remember, Dallas is the 5th seed in these playoffs, and have won each of their first 2 series from the road as the underdog. Minnesota held the number 1 seed in the Western Conference longer than any team in the conference on the regular season. They destroyed the Phoenix Suns in the first round of the playoffs, weathered a 3-2 deficit against the defending NBA champions. They have 2 All-Stars this season who finally played like it last night: the Defensive Player of the Year, the 6th Man of the Year, and again, the ascending new face of the NBA. This team is deep, talented, and poised. They have led in the final 5 minutes in all 4 games. They just need to find a way to not choke all over themselves in the clutch. That is their weakness. During the regular season, the Minnesota Timberwolves had a net rating of minus 13.1 in clutch time, defined as the final 5 minutes of a game within 5 points. That was 4th worst in the NBA this season, behind only Miami, Detroit, and Washington, whereas Dallas's plus 20.5 rating was 3rd best in the NBA, behind only Denver and Chicago. And that has been your difference in this series. At around the 3-minute mark, all 4 of these games were within 1 score, and Dallas has won 3 of the 4, behind their superior 2 closers. Minnesota, though, has dominated vast stretches of this series, and there is no reason to believe they won't have ample opportunities to win the next game, which will be in Minnesota. Of course, as any player or coach would regurgitate the age-old, tried-and-trusted line, they're going to just take it one game at a time. But the big game will obviously be Game 6 at Dallas. If the Wolves can find a way to win one more road game, this wouldn't be unthinkable. Yes, there is the aforementioned 0 and 155 to think of, but we hadn't seen a team down 3-0 even get into a 7th game in 20 years, until just last season, that is, when the Boston Celtics, after falling behind to the 8-seeded Miami Heat 3-0, came roaring back to force a Game 7. And the Wolves this year can join those Celtics in one very important distinction if they are able to do it. The previous 3 teams to force it to a 7th game after trailing 3-0 were the New York Knicks in 1951, the Denver Nuggets in 1994, and the Portland Trail Blazers in 2003. And while all 3 of those teams would ultimately fall in the winner-take-all Game 7, all 3 of those teams were on the road for that game. The Celtics became the first team ever last season to play that game at home, and the Timberwolves would be at home in a hypothetical 7th game showdown in this series. So while history still isn't with the Wolves at the moment, if they manage to get another win at home on Thursday, where they have opened as 4.5-point favorites for what it's worth, this series will officially have gotten pretty interesting, and the Wolves will have become the 12th team out of 155 to get it into a Game 6. And the pressure at that point will have shifted entirely back towards the Mavericks, who look to be on the verge of making history in their quest of a championship from the 5 seed, but who, if they aren't careful, might just end up making the wrong kind of history instead.